He's the longest tenured Giant. He's on a reasonable contract, and he's slugging .660 over his last 15 games, but he may or may not even be in the cards to be on the Giants next season. Yes, the case of Mike Yastrzemski is an interesting one.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015. I've been hosting this show since prior to the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase Locked On MLB to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And coming up on today's show, we are going to piggyback off of this game for the Giants, kind of looking at the continued offensive explosion for Mike Yastrzemski, who, like I said there in the open, is slugging .660 over his last 15 games. Now, granted, that is a small sample, but he's got 6 home runs in 15 games and a 179 weighted runs created plus over that span. So he's putting in his best work of the season right now, and that's important because before that he was struggling and kind of looking like he was on his way to potentially being non-tendered. And it's a complicated situation. Yastrzemski is, like I said, the longest tenured Giant at this point once they traded away Austin Slater. And for Yaz, it's just an amazing story. The fact that he debuted at age 28 or during his age 28 season. So actually he debuted at age 27 with the Giants and has been with the Giants ever since and put together a solid career for a guy who spent many, many years in the minor leagues. He started pro ball in 2013 and he didn't make his debut until 2019. And he almost got optioned in the middle of that 2019 season, but there was like an injury to somebody else. He stuck around and he's never been sent to the minors. Like after all that time in the minors, now he's ineligible to be sent to the minors because he's accumulated over 5 years of service time. So just on the one hand, it's worth kind of giving a shout out to a guy who's put together an impressive career given how things all started for him and the fact that he never got a chance with the Orioles. Just recently he hit his 100th career home run, which is just, like I said, a huge accomplishment for a guy who spent so much time toiling away in the minors and never getting a major league opportunity. So he's a great story, and he's been not a star, but a solid player for the Giants pretty much each and every year. And he's kind of like, polarizing a little bit. I think, the batting average aficionados out there look at, 240. Well, newsflash. What is the guess if 240 is making you mad about his batting average, guess what the league average batting average is in 2024. 244. So, okay, 4 points below average in that category. And the league average on base percentage, by the way, is 312, and Yastrzemski's at 313. Okay, so he gets on base about at a league average rate. However, the league average slugging is 400, and Yastrzemski's at 445 on the season. He was at exactly 445 last season. League average isolated power, which is slugging minus batting average, 157. Yaz is at 205. He was at 212 last year. So he's been an above average offensive player for pretty much his entire career. Not by a huge amount, but about 13% above average throughout the course of his career, and about at that same exact level this year. He's he's consistently inconsistent, but when all is said and done, he's remarkably consistent with the performance every year. Puts up about 2 Fangraphs wins above replacement, kind of an average major league player. And so you need guys like that, and that kind of production is worth what he's been paid. And so we get to the contract status here. So Yastrzemski was a Super 2, which means he's actually had 3 years of arbitration already, and he gets a 4th going into 2025. And most players just get 3 years of arbitration eligibility. He gets 4, and it has to do with, the amount of service time he had accumulated. Anyway, not important. But what is important is that he's making $7.9 million this year in arbitration year 3, and next year would be his last year of arbitration eligibility, meaning he would be able to hit free agency after the 2025 season. But if the Giants were to non-tender him, which is a decision they have to make early in the offseason. I've been tweeting about this morning, and some people are saying, well, if they sign, an outfielder who's better, then they can get rid of Yastrzemski. But it's not that simple. They have to make this decision basically before they would ultimately sign somebody else. So they have to think about this in advance. And it's a little bit of a tough call. And so the way arbitration works is that you get raises every year. And so the fact that he's making $7.9 million this year puts him in line for roughly, a $10 million contract for 2025. And it would just be a 1-year, $10 million deal. And then he would hit free agency after that at the age of 35. So it's amazing. He really started his Giants career at age 27, and now he's 34. And he's, if they bring him back next year, he'll, play out a whole, 6 years of service time worth of playing time with the Giants. So that is just remarkable in and of itself from a personal perspective for him. But the question is, do the Giants tender him a contract for 2025? Because, I've heard arguments that, okay, well, he'd be a good piece to have on the bench, right? But $10 million is not really what you want to be paying someone who's going to be sitting on the bench. And so you look at the outfield next year, you look at kind of what Elliot Ramos has done and the age of an Elliot Ramos, who's, I think, 25 years old at the present moment, and you look at Jung-Hoo Lee is definitely guaranteed a spot on next year's team. Elliot Ramos, same thing. And I see Ramos as a left fielder moving forward. Yeah, he just turned 25 a few days ago, Ramos did. And Jung-Hoo Lee is definitely going to be back and figures to play center. And then you look at one more outfield spot, and you've got Yastrzemski, you've got Grant McCray in the mix, you've got Luis Matos in the mix, you've got Wade Meckler on the 40-man roster, and then you've got the need to improve and the need to look at outfielders on the free agent or trade market. And so that's where it becomes a little bit of a question. So coming up in just a minute, we'll look at the consequences that would happen if you do bring him back versus if you don't. We'll hear from Bob Melvin about Yastrzemski. We'll hear from Yastrzemski himself about his contract situation because he knows what's going on as much as anybody. So we'll get into all of that in just a minute, and before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, myself included. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the action in most states, including the great state of California. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. I have had a blast playing Prize Picks all season long, have had some success as well all season long. So it's been just a ton of fun, and you can download the Prize Picks app today and use code all lowercase locked on MLB to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code all lowercase locked on MLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all of Sunday, September 15th pre-game moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting Thursday, September 12th. That is today. View your account page now to learn more about your boost. Just visit FanDuel.com, again, FanDuel.com, and download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, here we go. We're going to talk about Mike Yastrzemski and the ramifications if you do bring him back versus if you don't. We've already talked about this a little bit and talked about how much do they have to spend in the offseason. And I've based it on Yastrzemski and the decision whether to tender or non-tender him a contract. And so we'll get into that. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, I think we may be talking to Javier Reyes from Locked On Padres again, as the Padres are making their push for the postseason, but they're not guaranteed a spot yet. And it's always a good time talking to Javi, and the Padres are about to come into town. So hopefully we'll be talking to him again tomorrow. So for your second listen today, though, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor and help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And a reminder, you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Giants. So, Mike Yastrzemski, what do the Giants do here? The more the more he's been great. I mean, he's just been on a tear here. His last 15 games, he's got a 181 weighted runs created plus. Is that right? 179, whatever it is. He's been on a tear. I mean, you just have to watch the game to see. Hitting 260, 362 on base, 660 slugging over his last 60 or so plate appearances. I get it. It's a small sample. More importantly are the season numbers. You do have to think about age-related decline at this point. He is 34 years old, but he also, is a important player on this team. So Bob Melvin spoke to Andrew Baggarly, among others, I assume. And in this piece in The Athletic by Baggarly, we've got this quote from Melvin on Yastrzemski. He says, quote, "He's doing his best work right now. This is the place you don't love to hit nor play the outfield. Not only does he swing the bat well here, but he plays right field as well as anybody. This is probably the best he's played all year. And you look at veteran guys late in the year and the way they're playing, his pace and urgency with where we are in the standings, it's impressive to watch." And then via Baggarly and others, Yastrzemski had this to say about his status. He said, "After April, I was pretty frustrated. I just really wanted to battle back and prove my value because I love this place. I don't want to go anywhere for as long as I play. I love the staff. The front office has treated me like family. The fans are incredible and made it feel like home. The goal here is to stay as long as I can, and I understand that's usually based on performance. So I just continue to try to bring value, whether it's leading in here, whether it's playing the right way. Whether it's leading in here, like in the clubhouse, whether it's playing the right way, whether it's running hard, making some plays on defense. I just want to show value in every place I can to try to stick around as long as I can. And so, some noteworthy comments in there for sure. One of the things, you see on Twitter, I don't know how commonly believed this is, but you hear about, Farhan Zaidi and his computer and shut in an office and looking at spreadsheets. And then you have a player saying, the front office has treated me like family. I love the staff, So it's, contrary to false opinions that have no merit, you do have players saying stuff like this a lot. So, that is noteworthy. And it's noteworthy that he wants to stay, doesn't want to play anywhere else, and to have a position player, it's hard to get position players to want to play at this ballpark. And he does, and he has hit well here. I mean, if you look at his career hitting at Oracle Park, he's hit 248, which is above average, 338 on base, 451 slugging, about 20% above average offense playing at Oracle Park. And if you look at away from Oracle Park, he's been just about 7% above average. So he's hit better at home than away from home in his career. And this season, not that we should really be breaking this down by season because we're looking at smaller and smaller samples when we do that, but let's just even go the last 2 years. Yastrzemski at home has hit 282, 364 on base, 490 slugging. Strikeout rate just 20%, 20.1. That's about 40% above average offense. So he really has hit quite well at Oracle. And let's just say away from home over the last 2 years, he's been about 15% below average, 196 average, 281 on base, 405 slugging. So some of that is just probably small sample weirdness, but also 40% above average at home, 15% below average on the road. That's interesting to say the least. But again, small samples. Home, we're talking a little less than 400 plate appearances. Not the tiniest of samples, but still. So the question is, where do you there's a lot of if this, then that. If you bring him back, you're committing 10 million-ish that you could commit elsewhere, and you need to improve. Your team's not, where you want it to be. It'd be one thing if you're like a 95-win team, Yastrzemski's a part of that, even like a 92-win team, and Yastrzemski's a part of that, and you just want to kind of keep it going. But this is a team that needs to add wins. They need to get better. And so when you start looking at where can they improve on the diamond, at the catcher position, Patrick Bailey is like set in stone. They also have Tom Murphy under contract for next year as well. He's been hurt basically all season. Don't judge him by his 12 games played that he had this year. I'm not. At first base, yeah, that's a position where they could upgrade. You do have a solid little setup with, Wilmer Flores is probably going to opt into his $3.5 million player option. It's a very reasonable price for a guy who was very good 2 years ago and just injured this year. And then Wade, Lamont Wade has been good and good in his platoon role. But at the same time, could you go out and make a significant upgrade with a Pete Alonso or a Christian Walker? Yeah, you could, and you probably should. And then I think there's a middle infield spot open, given that Tyro Estrada was, basically kicked off the 40-man roster here and therefore seems unlikely to factor in, certainly in a starting role in 2025 to start the season. Tyler Fitzgerald has done enough probably to warrant and earn a spot at a middle infield spot. And then you've got Marco Luciano in the mix. He still can be optioned let me just double check on that before I say that outright. But I believe, Luciano still has another option year next year. And then at third base, you're obviously locked in with Matt Chapman. And then, like I said, left field, I think Ramos has certainly done enough to be the incumbent there and have a starting spot in 2025. I'm calling it now. He could be that guy who finally ends the streak of left fielders. It would take 2 years to do it because next year he would be the first year of him starting in left, another different opening day left fielder. And then Jung-Hoo Lee. And then you've, like I said, Grant McRae, Luis Matos, all these guys. So if you bring back Yastrzemski, it just limits the areas where you can upgrade. And I didn't mention DH, and I probably should, because while I didn't think going into last offseason that they should just sign a pure DH, because you have to think about also Bryce Eldridge and the rise that he's been on. He's 19 years old and he's in AA right now, and is just a very intriguing prospect, plays first base. And so if you do, it might make you not want to sign a first baseman. But I think I think Christian Walker makes a lot of sense given that he's going to be 34 going into the season. So it wouldn't take a super long-term commitment and, give you some flexibility at first base, DH. Like it would, don't tie yourself down to a DH and leave room for a Bryce Eldridge. So then all of a sudden you're looking at maybe only being able to upgrade at a middle infield spot. And I'm not sure that's enough. I think maybe you need to try to upgrade in the outfield and in the middle infield and at first base. And then we're not getting into pitching right now, but I do think bringing back a high caliber frontline type starter, of course, would make a lot of sense. And this is something the Giants have been in the market for like every year. And they consistently bring people in who are that type, whether it was Gausman or Rodon or Snell. I think Corbin Burns is, he went to college locally, St. Mary's, and, California guy. He's someone to definitely watch. Blake Snell is a guy to watch as a guy they could bring back. So yeah, anyway, I'll give my final thoughts on this and what I'm thinking at the moment that the Giants should do. Could be a tough call. Could definitely be a tough call. We'll get into their other arbitration decisions. Is there anywhere else they could kind of save some money to upgrade? We'll get into all of that in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by Tonal. Even the most dedicated gym goers struggle with consistency. The commute, waiting for weights, other people's sweat. It makes skipping a workout very tempting. With Tonal, you can choose from thousands of workouts and train in a way you actually enjoy at home. Tonal is the world's smartest and most effective strength training system that helps you get stronger. Powered by AI, Tonal learns with every rep, so it can deliver workouts personalized just for you. Tonal learns from your movement and provides suggested weight recommendations for every move with detailed progress reports. They even create personalized programs and workout suggestions or recommendations based on your individual goals. It's like having a personal trainer at home with you, as Tonal will optimize every workout just for you. Unlike traditional gym equipment, Tonal uses adaptive digital weight to advance your training techniques. Right now, Tonal is offering our listeners $200 off your Tonal purchase with promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Tonal.com, and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $200 off your purchase. That's Tonal.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $200 off. All right, here we go. We're going to give our final thoughts on this and maybe make a recommendation. I'm afraid to do it because it's hard. It's a tough call on Mike Yastrzemski. And, he really wants to be here, as you heard from those quotes. But sometimes this is a ruthless game and you have to make tough decisions. We saw it with Thairo Estrada already this year, but Estrada was really struggling. And Yaz is coming on real strong to end the year, hitting at the top of the lineup, in the lineup pretty much every day. So anyway, thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, like I said, we'll be breaking down this game against the Brewers. It's a night game, a little bit odd on getaway day, but and then the Padres will be coming into town, and I hope to talk to Javier Reyes. Always fun talking with him. So also a reminder about Postcast with Eric Engel, which you can go to Locked On Sports San Francisco on YouTube and subscribe. Eric also does postcasts for every 49ers game, Warriors game, and Giants game. And then the Giants ones go on our regular podcast feed with the title Postcast as the first word. yeah, for instant reaction, goes live on YouTube right after the game. So check that out for the last couple weeks of the season, and then be checking it out as the 49ers have gotten underway here for that content as well. Locked On Sports San Francisco on YouTube. So ultimately, I struggle with this. I was struggling with it when Yaz. Actually, I was kind of leaning towards Yaz as a guy who would ultimately be non-tendered about a month ago when his numbers weren't so good. And then now you just look at the way he's played over the last several weeks. I mean, he's crushing the ball right now. Every at bat is quality. He's hitting the ball hard. It's up and down every year, but when you look at the final numbers, it's been remarkably consistent. And I mean, like I said, in his career, he's been 13% above average by this weighted runs created plus metric. This year, 12% above average. It's just every year he just manages to get there. And in right field, you're talking +6 defensive runs saved this year, 0 outs above average. That, it's best to look at these numbers in like 3 season samples. And, he's graded out just well. I think there's no doubt he plays the outfield pretty darn well. And the age is a concern, and you start to factor in decline, and you start to consider, you're paying more next year potentially for a guy who may, that consistency I'm talking about, at some point you stop performing at a high level. But Yaz, I mean, we could look at stuff like his sprint speeds and all that just to see if there's any indications of decline. And in fact, I'm going to do that right this second. And his speed has been pretty steady the last 3 years. He's been below average as a runner the last 3 years, but so he hasn't really slowed down the last 3 years. It's been consistent in that regard. And his expected numbers this year are actually not great. He's actually outperforming the expected numbers. 29th percentile expected weighted on base average, whereas the last couple years it was like 50th percentile. Arm strength has actually improved a little bit. Outs above average has gone down a little bit this year. And so, look, I don't know. This is a tough call. This is why I'm glad I don't I'm glad I don't work in a front office, because this is a tough call to make. Ultimately, some have suggested online, I think it's a reasonable thought. Like, he wants to play here. There's a chance you could, non-tender him and then re-sign him to a cheaper deal where he's someone who there's a little more flexibility, where he doesn't have to be a starter and he could be depth, and not necessarily that starter, because you have to make this decision early on in the offseason whether or not to tender him a contract. And so if it's going to cost you about $10 million, you could say, look, Mike, we want you back, but that's a little much, a little rich for, we need to get better, and we don't want to have to tie ourselves down to you as the starter every day. And you could possibly work something out where you non-tender him and then sign him to a cheaper deal, or maybe negotiate like a 2-year deal that basically gets him a total guarantee of $10 million. So he gets that $10 million, but you spread it out over a couple of seasons instead of putting it all into one, something like that. Or, you realize that this guy at that price is probably someone that would be desirable to other teams, not that they would necessarily give up a ton. I'm of the mind it's hard to trade guys these days who make any kind of money unless you're a superstar. Like, teams are just going to wait out the market. If you're thinking we tender him the contract, it ends up being around $10 million, and then you trade him, it's just teams are going to recognize that you need to trade him, and they're going to not want to offer you anything. It's just hard. Teams have just gotten really, really stingy with how they operate. And so that idea I don't love, and I don't know that it would work out. But the idea of kind of restructuring maybe is maybe one that makes the most sense. I think this guy still has value. He's kind of a forever giant, in my opinion. I don't use that term lightly, but just his story and the way that he's persevered and the way that he wants to be here and loves playing here, I think you reward guys like that. And He is a leader in that clubhouse, and he is the longest tenured player. But at $10 million for 1 year, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, especially when you need to upgrade and say, they're operating on a budget, whether you like it or whether they say it or not. And so that's potentially $10 million per year, for 2025 that you could allocate somewhere else. And they probably should. And that's why I think some kind of restructuring might make the most sense ultimately. So I'm still undecided. Let's see how the last, 17 games or whatever go. If he stays hot, it could make the decision super easy. If he falls into a huge slump, it could make the decision easier in the other direction. So still games to be played, still evaluating every day. And that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Now, go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening today. You are now Locked On Giants.